Hello, listeners. It's February 1st, 2025. Welcome to Voice Over Work, an audiobook sampler. Where do you listen? Today, we've got an audiobook sampler from the new book, Small Talk That Doesn't Suck by Patrick King. Available on Amazon, this book is all about mastering the art of small talk in any situation, whether it's a job interview or just meeting someone new. The audiobook is available on Amazon, iTunes, and Audible, so no matter how you like to listen, you've got options. Plus, you can learn more about Patrick King and his work at bit.ly/PK Consulting. So stay tuned as we bring you a sneak peek of what this book has to offer, straight from the pages to your ears. Get ready for some engaging insights on small talk that doesn't suck, because who couldn't use those skills? Don't forget, you can always find more resources and information at newtonmg.com. That's right, it's time to level up your conversational game with small talk that doesn't suck. Stay tuned as we dive into the world of effective communication, one voice at a time, on this episode of Voice Over Work. Chapter 1. Laying a Good Foundation. Have you ever heard someone say, "I love small talk. I can't get enough of it"? Probably not. And yet, small talk is actually one of humanity's greatest inventions. Small talk lowers risk while maximizing the chances of understanding and enjoyment. Small talk helps us connect with minimal fuss and hassle, and makes sure that those initial interactions with a stranger are as rewarding as they possibly can be. Small talk is like a key, and it opens doors to more interesting conversations, more authentic relationships, and a life with far fewer misunderstandings. This book is not just about surviving small talk or finding some clever hacks to help you avoid it. Instead, we'll be looking at ways to embrace and maximize this peculiar mode of interaction so that you genuinely can become that person who loves small talk. In the chapters that follow, we'll be looking at the deeper attitudes and core beliefs that will actually empower and inspire you in social situations. We'll look at all the principles that will help you work with conversational energy and flow, lean into real curiosity for others, and show up in conversations as the real, unique, and vulnerable person you are right now. We'll also consider in some detail exactly what you say, when and how you say it, and what to do when things don't quite go to plan. You may not feel much love for small talk right now, or indeed any form of social interaction. Nevertheless, my hope is that by the end of this book, you will have found a renewed sense of appreciation for all the possibilities this art form can offer. And conversation is most definitely an art form. Awkwardness is not a bug, it's a feature. What's the number one reason people hate small talk? That's easy. It's awkward. It's cringy and embarrassing and super uncomfortable, right? I'm here to tell you the good and the bad news. The bad news is that awkwardness really is an obstacle to enjoyable, easy conversation with others. But the good news is that it's a psychological obstacle, one that can be overcome. Most of us could stand to connect more with those around us and have deeper and richer relationships with the people who are already in our worlds. We may recognize the desire to have better relationships and to connect more freely and comfortably with others. But the barrier to entry just seems way too high. We may look at the prospect of engaging with strangers and think, that's too much hard work. It's just not worth it. The first major mindset shift to make, however, is knowing how to honestly acknowledge awkwardness, to understand what it is, and to know how to communicate anyway. In other words, If you're unwilling to make social efforts until you feel less awkward, you'll be waiting a long time. Rather, the trick is to change the way you think about this feeling of awkwardness. Tai Tashiro is a psychologist who was so interested in the phenomenon of awkwardness that he wrote a book about it. Awkward, the Science of Why We're Socially Awkward. Chapter 2, The Secret of Brilliant Small Talk. Natalie was someone who'd always struggled with social interactions. So when she received an autism diagnosis later in adulthood, a lot of pieces suddenly fell into place. The trouble was, Natalie found that the diagnosis actually made it harder to connect. She'd always felt different. Now she had concrete proof that she really was. She became concerned about whether others could tell. She became obsessed with finding tricks and shortcuts to help her pass as normal and ensure that nobody could make out how difficult she found everything. This plan only backfired. When Natalie met new people, she was so nervous about how she appeared to them that she quickly became overwhelmed and acted even more awkwardly than she normally would. It got so bad that Natalie soon felt like giving up altogether. She soon had the attitude that she didn't care anymore about pretending to be someone she wasn't. But then a curious thing happened. She suddenly found herself far, far more comfortable in social interactions, enjoying them even. So what happened? Your flaws are small talk material. People often avoid social interactions because they fear making mistakes or saying something silly. They fear looking like idiots, stumbling on their words, or having others notice that they're anxious. Like Natalie, they may genuinely believe that the only way they can become better at socializing is to become less of who they really are. They imagine that success means crafting some kind of perfect mask to put over their real selves so that nobody ever sees their awkward, uncomfortable, unusual selves. The best conversationalists don't hide their flaws, however. Instead, they embrace them. In fact, they have an attitude that does not see flaws at all, but rather simple variations. Being socially confident and having engaging conversations does not mean that we're perfect and untouchable. Instead, it actually begins with being vulnerable. This realization is often very counterintuitive for those who have spent much of their lives feeling like outsiders. Vulnerability involves being open, admitting faults, and sharing hopes, failures, and fears while acknowledging weaknesses. It means being brave enough to lead with your own humanity, exactly as it is and exactly as you are. Our culture often values stoicism, imperviousness, and superhuman success. Our collective model for a super-accomplished extrovert is someone who seems kind of bulletproof and beyond reproach. These are the figures we see conjured before us in the form of glossy celebrities or social media influencers who are almost painfully perfect. They don't struggle, make fools of themselves, or feel bad. They're invincible, and everything is easy for them, right? Actually, this vision is worse than harmful. It's just plain wrong. A 1998 study on interpersonal vulnerability and anxiety revealed. Chapter 3. The Nuts and Bolts of Conversation. In the last chapter, we turned a few common conversation misconceptions on their head. Rather than hiding your flaws, try embracing them. Rather than keeping quiet about your unique beliefs, opinions, and perspectives, share them calmly and confidently. And, rather than getting fixated on good or bad topics of conversation, be flexible enough to talk about anything because you can if you do it in the right way. The most important part of becoming a better communicator is understanding that how you say things matter more than what you say, and that your attitude and delivery are infinitely more influential than whether you agree with, understand, or like the person in front of you. In this chapter, we're going to take a deeper dive into the actual mechanics of conversation. If a good conversation were a machine, what kind of parts would it be made of? How would it function? What would it look like if it didn't function properly? 4 key elements of every conversation. Therapist Michel Chalfant believes that a good place to start is to try to understand the purpose of conversation. For Chalfant and many other therapists, communication exists primarily to fulfill our innate need for belonging. We talk so that we can connect. Therefore, it stands to reason that if we want to connect as well as possible, we need to get good at meeting people's needs to belong. Now, in the next section, we'll see that there are a few other purposes behind communication, sharing data or solving problems, for example. But even these are indirect ways of meeting our deeper emotional needs, i.e., the need to be seen and heard, respected, included, and validated, as well as the need to belong and have one's contributions accepted. Keeping this ultimate, deeper human need in mind at all times, yes, even when having the most superficial conversations, we can now consider 4 key elements that make most conversations, big and small. We talk to ask, inform, include, or propose. What's great about sticking to just these 4 elements is that it takes the pressure off. If you successfully include just these 4 elements, your conversation will feel balanced and engaging. You don't need to worry about anything else, like entertaining, lecturing, convincing, complimenting, or charming the other person. When you're in the middle of a conversation, your anxiety can sometimes make it feel like the spotlight is on you and the clock is ticking. You may feel like you're supposed to say something witty, clever, amusing, or extra interesting, and say it fast. You don't. If you're stumped, just include one of these elements and go from there. Asking. To master the art of making easy small talk, leverage the first element of conversation, asking. This involves posing low-pressure, straightforward questions that aren't overly personal, allowing the other person to feel at ease. Chapter 4. But what do I actually say? Hopefully you're convinced that there is, contrary to popular advice, a place in everyday conversation for your flaws, your opinions, and your personal beliefs. In fact, with practice, you may start to see these things not as impediments to good conversation, but as necessary ingredients, a set of superpowers even. Likewise, there is no right thing to say or best question to ask, only what is appropriate for that person in that conversation at that time and place. The big skill behind cultivating conversational flow is the ability to know exactly when to share an opinion and when to ask for one, when to push and when to pull, when to say factual, and when to delve a little into emotions and personal perspectives. In this chapter, we'll look a little more closely at the idea of a conversational sweet spot, that is, that perfectly flowing state where conversation is varied and lively. Maintain conversational flow with foothfay. In the moment, a well-flowing conversation can feel almost magical, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly why things are clicking so well. Luckily, we have a few tools to help us deliberately create this feeling of flow. One of these tools is the FUFE acronym. It offers us a structured approach for making sure that we are including plenty of varied elements in our conversation. These elements include feelings, observations, opinions, facts, action statements, autobiographical elements, and events. Exceptional conversationalists seamlessly integrate these categories, while poor conversationalists may rely too heavily on a few. Again, we see the same principle emerge. It's not that any one element is good or bad. Rather, what matters is the fluidity with which we're able to move between different elements. Using the acronym is easy. The next time you're in a conversation, realize that at any moment, you are at liberty to choose the kind of contribution you make, and, in doing so, steer the tone and direction of that conversation. Let's say you're in a small talk situation with someone and chatting about their dog. Using FUFE, you can choose between the following. Feeling: I absolutely love your dog. Observation: you have such a well-behaved dog. Opinion: I think pugs are the best kind of small dog breed. Fact: I was reading that pugs are usually... Action statement: I want to adopt a dog like that. Autobiographical: my brother has a pug too. Event: did you hear? Frank just adopted a dog last month. In the above example, the speaker has shared their own opinions, observations, etc. You can also use this framework, however, to guide the questions you ask or shape the comment you make about their opinions, feelings, and so on. Chapter 5. When and Why It Goes Wrong. In our final chapter, we'll be exploring all those ways that, despite our best efforts, conversations can flop. Whether it's a lack of empathy, or the wrong kind of empathy, some kind of imbalance, a mismatch in contributions or styles, or a weird little moment of misunderstanding, conversations can and do go wrong sometimes. Being a skilled conversationalist simply requires that we know how to handle ourselves when things don't go to plan. The empathy formula. Zara has always felt like an outsider. Having been bullied as a child, as an adult she finds it extremely difficult to make friends, to assert herself, and to chat comfortably with people on the spur of the moment. One day Zara is surprised to hear from a close friend that when they first met her, they actually found her a little cold. The friend explained that Zara initially seemed a bit mean and judgmental. Zara is shocked by this admission. She always assumed that people were judging her. How do we explain this? One of the unfortunate realities of social anxiety is just how much it can remove us from the present moment, from ourselves, and from other people. When we are anxious and preoccupied with our own self-conscious feelings, we turn inward and lose connection with the outside world. For some people, that can mean coming across as uncertain, unconfident, and submissive. But for other people, their shyness can actually make them appear to others as aloof and even a little arrogant. This may not seem fair, but there is truth in the observation made by Zara's friend. When we are preoccupied with our own anxieties, we actually are less empathetic. Because Zara was spending so much mental energy and attention on trying to survive and navigate stressful social situations, there wasn't much mental energy left to spend on other people. The result was that she often failed to ask people questions about themselves, failed to give praise or compliments, failed to be warm and friendly, and failed to really listen to what other people were saying to her. For example, During a Zoom call with fellow students on her university course, Zara remembers how intensely she stared at her own face on the screen, scanning for anything potentially embarrassing, monitoring how she might appear, and trying to act natural. At the end of the meeting, however, Zara could recall nothing of what went on. She couldn't remember who else was in the meeting, what they looked like, what they said, or what the lesson was even about. From Zara's point of view, she was anxious and hyper-focused on her own stress throughout the entire meeting. But from the other students' point of view, all they saw was someone who was not engaged. The ability to empathize is crucial in navigating conversations of all kinds. It's a skill that requires emotional literacy and self-awareness, and it also requires that we're sufficiently outside our own heads. The reason we begin this chapter with Zara's story is to emphasize that a lack of empathy is not always about being a deliberately mean, uncaring, and unkind person. In fact, we most often fail to empathize properly simply because we're preoccupied with our own drama and are just being inconsiderate. Everyone likes to think that they're an above-average driver, and that What if there was a way to transform those awkward interactions into something more substantial? What if you could skip the small talk altogether and go straight to rapport, all while avoiding most of the uncomfortable moments that tend to arise? Well, my friend, that's exactly what Patrick King has done with his latest book, Small Talk That Doesn't Suck. In this transformative guide, you'll discover extremely specific guidelines and prompts that will help you connect with anyone, anywhere, in a matter of minutes. You'll learn what to say, how to say it, and when to say it, all while being likable, memorable, and magnetic. Small Talk That Doesn't Suck is now available on Amazon, and for those who prefer audiobooks, you can also find it on Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Head over to the website mentioned earlier to get your copy today and start mastering these conversation tactics that will change your life forever. Remember, your dream career, friendships, and overall happiness depend on it. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing, and remember, small talk doesn't have to suck anymore.